The jukebox in the lounge was playing some old tune from the 50s, crackling through speakers that had seen better days. I sat in the corner with my coffee, watching the steam rise, letting the warmth soak into my palms. Nights at the clubhouse were usually quiet, men playing cards, women talking about the bake sale, the clink of ice in glasses. I preferred it that way. Quiet suited me. But tonight, quiet didn't last. "Hey, old soldier," Commander Harris said, standing near the bar with a smile sharp enough to cut. His voice carried loud enough for every head to turn. "Remind us of your call sign. Didn't you have one back in the day?" I felt the eyes of the room fall on me. Some curious, some mocking. The jukebox warbled into silence just then, like even the machine wanted to hear my answer. I tightened my hand around the mug. The ceramic felt hot, steady. I didn't say a word. A man at the next table chuckled. Maybe he forgot. Another laughed. Or maybe he never had one. The sound rippled across the lounge, an easy laugh at someone else's expense. I kept my face still, but inside I felt the heat rising, the old shame pressing in. I thought about the patch tucked in my jacket pocket. Stitched edges frayed, the colors dulled with time. My hand brushed it once hidden. Tease of memory. No one else saw. "Come on," Harris pressed. What was it? 2 words. Wasn't it? I didn't look at him. I only lifted the mug, sipped, and set it down again. The silence stretched. A young man near the jukebox leaned forward, studying me. He couldn't have been more than 20, maybe 21. His eyes held no mockery, just a question I'd seen before, the wonder of someone who wanted to know what truth looked like. "You gonna tell us or not?" someone called. Harris grinned wider, enjoying the moment. They asked for his name and silence answered louder. He mocked, twisting my pause into a punchline. The crowd laughed again. I shifted in my seat. The bylaws of the Homeowners Association hung on the bulletin board, by the door pages, curling at the edges, a reminder that even here rules watched over us. My life seemed to have been reduced to rules and reminders. I pressed my lips together, steadying my breath. "Maybe he never earned it," a man muttered near the bar. The young witness shook his head. "That's not true." His voice was soft, almost lost in the chatter, but I heard it. For a moment, no one else spoke. Then Harris clapped his hands once. "Well, if he won't answer tonight, we'll ask again." He raised his glass. "Tomorrow, same place." I let out a slow breath, the kind that carried years behind it. My eyes stayed on the dark coffee in my cup, but I knew the whole room was watching. The jukebox clicked, a new record dropping into place. Music filled the silence again, but the air stayed heavy. The diner sat on Main Street, same as it had since the 60s. Chrome stools lined the counter, their red vinyl cracked at the seams. The smell of bacon grease clung to the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of syrup and the sharp bite of burnt coffee. I slid onto my usual stool, the one closest to the window. The waitress, Maggie, gave me a nod. She didn't ask if I wanted a refill. She just poured the stream of black coffee steaming into my mug. "Morning," she said softly. I lifted the cup, took a sip, and let the warmth settle into my hands. The bell over the door jingled. Laughter rolled in before the cold air had even faded. 3 men from the homeowners board filed inside. They carried with them the echo of last night, the lounge still clinging to their voices. "Well, look who we've got here," one said, grinning wide as he spotted me. "Old man with old stories," the others chuckled. They claimed a booth near the counter, close enough to be heard. One leaned back, raising his voice. "Tell us, soldier, what was it, your call sign? Or is that classified now?" Their laughter bounced off the tiled walls. Maggie sighed and wiped the counter with a rag. I stirred my coffee, slow, steady circles. The spoon clinked against the mug. I didn't look up. Maybe he never had one another teased. Maybe it was just silence. The youth from the lounge sat at the far end of the counter, hunched over a plate of pancakes. His fork froze halfway to his mouth as he glanced at me, waiting. His eyes held no mockery, only a question. "Hey," one of the boardmen called louder, "prove you're not just an old man with old stories." I set the spoon down, the sound sharp in the small room. Their voices filled the diner. A couple at a corner table glanced over, uneasy, but said nothing. I reached for my wallet to pay, and something slipped free. A small coin struck the counter, spinning on its edge before dropping flat. The room hushed. The letters caught the light. V1. The youth leaned closer. "What's that?" I placed my hand over the coin. "Just a token," I murmured. But silence has its own way of speaking. V1. One of the men read aloud. He squinted. Guess he really was somebody. The man beside him smirked. Once. I closed my fist around the coin, its cool surface pressed against my palm, heavy with years. Respect isn't lost, I thought. It's hidden, waiting to be found. Maggie slid fresh plates onto the men's booth, her eyes flicking toward me with quiet concern. "You all right, hun?" she whispered as she passed. I gave her a nod. That was all I could manage. The youth's voice rose clearer than before. "Respect isn't lost. It's hidden, waiting to be found." Every head turned. His words lingered in the air, heavier than the laughter that came before. The boardmen shifted in their seats. One cleared his throat, tried to laugh it off. Kid doesn't know what he's talking about. But the seed had been planted. The silence stretched, broken only by the rattle of dishes in the kitchen. Then I noticed an envelope on the counter beside my mug. I hadn't seen it placed there, but its edges were crisp, official. Across the front, stamped in red, formal notice. The HOA seal glared from the corner like a warning. One of the boardmen tapped it with his finger. "Business never stops. You'll want to read that." I pushed it aside, unopened. Later. Their smirks faded to something else, something colder. They leaned back in their booth, whispering among themselves. Maggie poured me another refill. "Don't let them get to you," she said under her breath. "Some folks talk louder than their lives." I gave her a quiet thank you. My voice felt rough in my throat. The youth kept staring at me. Not with pity, not with doubt, with recognition. The bell jingled again. The chatter fell quiet before the door even shut. Commander Harris stepped inside. His boots clicked against the tile. He took off his hat, scanned the room, and found me at the counter. He didn't smile this time. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp. "Tomorrow," he said. The diner held its breath. Maggie froze, coffee pot hovering mid-air. The youth looked between us, wide-eyed. "Tomorrow," Harris repeated, his voice slicing through the silence. "No more hiding." I wrapped my hand tighter around the coin in my pocket. The envelope lay unopened at my side. The coffee tasted bitter, now heavier than before. The air in the diner felt too tight, as if the walls themselves were waiting for what tomorrow would bring. The post office line moved the way time does in a small town, slow with a little gossip to grease the wheels. I stood near the door, a parcel tucked under my arm, letting the cool air from outside wash over me each time the hinges squeaked. Sunlight made a square on the scuffed tile. Sand clung to our boots. "Did you hear about the lounge?" a woman whispered behind me. A man answered louder than a whisper ought to be. He froze. Wouldn't even say his call sign. Another voice, he's nobody now. I stared at the cork bulletin board on the far wall. Layers of flyers curled at the corners, lost dog piano lessons, a potluck schedule taped over last year's. The HOA permit for the holiday parade was pinned front and center, the letters official and bored. Below it, a faded photograph I hadn't noticed in years. Through the glass door came a wash of radio static, a station someone left on in the cafe next door. The hiss cut through the room and then thinned like a breath drawn back. The young man from the lounge slipped in holding a stamped envelope. He joined the line, then drifted toward the board as if something there were calling his name. His eyes scanned the layers, quick but careful. He pointed. "That picture," he said to the clerk who didn't look up. Is that for the public?" "It's a board," the clerk said, sliding a roll of stamps under the glass. "If it's not private, it's public." The youth stepped closer, fingers hovering but not touching. "This one," he murmured. "It says V1. I stayed where I was. My breath caught the way a thread catches on a nail, small but enough to hold. A woman behind me leaned to her friend. "The boy's got a sharp eye." Her friend answered, "Sharp eyes don't change old stories." The youth called out, not to me exactly, but to anyone who'd answer. "What's V1 stand for?" No one answered. The line shuffled forward, the door swung open, and the radio static swelled again, a soft rush like wind through wires. The youth turned, saw me, and took a step in my direction. "Sir," he asked, "do you know what V1 means?" I set the parcel on the counter's edge and adjusted the label. "It's just letters," I said. He nodded, not convinced. "Letters with a meaning." The clerk stamped a package, thunk, 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 and said without looking up, "Ext." I held my spot. The youth moved back to the bored eyes fixed on the photograph. He read aloud, careful with each word. "Logistics team, forward airstrip. Viper 1. He stopped, then read it again, quieter. "Viper 1. The man in line beside me snorted. "Don't mean anything now." The youth looked at him. "Maybe it does." The man shrugged. "Folks get old. That's all." The youth's voice softened. "A call sign is a memory, not a boast." A murmur went through the line. Someone cleared a throat. The clerk raised an eyebrow at the glass. I kept my eyes on the board on the small corner of the photograph, where the edges had gone white from sun. The door swung again. Radio static spilled in, and for a heartbeat, the grainy wash sounded like surf. Then it was gone. A woman from the HOA board clipped past, heels bright on tile. She posted a new permit beside the old one, straightened both with a practiced hand, and fluffed the stack of forms below. "Holiday hours," she announced. "All updates are posted here as usual." She glanced at me, at the youth, then followed our gaze to the faded photo. "Vintage stuff," she said lightly. "We could probably take that down." The youth shook his head. "I think it should stay." She smiled the way people do when they want to close a door without making noise. "We'll see." I picked up my parcel again. The label felt rough against my palm, the tape lifting a little at the corner. "Leave it," I said. Her smile thinned. "You'll need to submit a request." "Then I'm requesting," I told her, voice low. She hesitated, then tapped the edge of the board with a manicured nail. "The board decides." "Boards decide a lot of things," I said. The youth looked from her to me. "It matters," he said. "People should know." A man in line spoke toward the floor. People already decided. The clerk slid the glass window wider. You mailing that or polishing it? Next, I stepped forward and pushed the parcel through. Mailed, I said. The youth glanced back at the photograph. Is that really him, he asked, quiet, uncertain, hungry for an answer. I didn't move. The question hung there with the radio static, like both were waiting to be made into something more than noise. Names come and go, the HOA woman said, shuffling her forms. What matters is the rules. The youth frowned. Rules don't remember you. Sometimes they do, I said almost to myself. Just not the way you'd like. The door opened again. The radio static rose and then cut out as someone turned the knob on the shop next door. In the sudden hush, dust motes showed themselves in the slant of sun. The clerk handed me a receipt. Tracking's on the bottom. Anything else? I looked at the board one more time. The permit pinned straight. The photograph bowed in the middle. The letters V1 printed small and stubborn. Not today, I said. The youth stepped closer to me as I turned. His voice dropped. Sir, if it is you, why won't you say I let the silence stand between us solid as a counter? The line rustled. Paper whispered on cork. Outside, a truck downshifted at the light. The town went on the way towns do. Then from somewhere past the door, through the thin wall, we all pretend is thicker. A voice came on the radio, low, warm, familiar, in a way that tugged at the rib cage like a remembered hymn. Tonight at the VFW lounge, the voice said, riding the faint hiss we talk about names that served us well. Some names never fade. The static smoothed into music. The clerk looked up. The youth looked at me. The bored woman's hands paused on her stack of forms. I kept my eyes on the photo and felt the room tip toward whatever tomorrow would be. The lounge carried a weight it never had before. Lights dimmed low amber glow, softening the walls lined with framed photographs. Coffee mugs crowded the tables, steam rising in curls that wove with the faint smell of polish and tobacco. The jukebox blinked quietly in the corner, a colored light spinning, but no song playing. Tonight, no one wanted music. Tonight, the town had come for something else. I chose a seat near the wall, my back steady, my jacket heavy on my shoulders. Inside the inner pocket, the patch rested against my palm, threads worn smooth by years of touch. Around me, the buzz of voices rose and fell like restless tide. They weren't gathered for pie or cards or laughter. They had gathered for me, though no one dared say it out loud. Commander Harris stood near the center table, his stance firm, boots planted. He looked neither angry nor kind, just immovable, a stone set in the middle of the floor. His voice carried without strain. Tonight, he said, we ask again. Not for rumor, not for whispers, for truth. The words fell heavy. Chairs scraped cups, clicked onto saucers. Even the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to slow. Someone in the back chuckled under his breath. Maybe he never had one. Maybe it's just an old story. A few weak laughs answered, but they died when Harris raised his hand. Silence pressed back in denser than smoke. The youth, the same boy who had followed every whisper through diner and post office, slid a chair closer to me. His eyes searched my face like he was reading a code only I could unlock. He wanted more than gossip, he wanted certainty. I let out a breath steady, though my chest felt like a bag of sand pressing from within. My hand moved toward my jacket pocket. The motion was slow, but every gaze in the room followed as if pulled by string. I withdrew the patch edges, frayed colors dulled but not erased. I laid it flat on the table where the light caught its stitches. The lounge stilled. Conversations froze mid-breath. A waitress paused with the coffee pot suspended in her hand. For a moment, even the neon sign outside seemed to hold its flicker. The youth leaned forward, knuckles white against the chair's arm. Commander Harris's voice dropped to a tone that brooked no retreat. "Say it." I touched the patch with my fingertip. The fabric felt rough, every thread carrying more years than I wanted to admit. My mouth opened, and the words left steady, quieter than the scrape of a chair. Viper 1. The syllables were soft, yet they landed like iron. The truth speaks softly, yet it silences a room. Every eye in the lounge locked on me. The air changed, mockery dissolved, replaced with something heavier. Awe, shame, recognition. Perhaps all at once. The waitress lowered her pot slowly, a tear escaping as she brushed her cheek with the corner of her apron. A man from the hardware store shifted in his seat, rubbing his palms against his jeans. Even the board members who had carried themselves tall shrank back, shoulders curling inwards. The youth's lips parted. He repeated the words as if to anchor them in the air. Viper 1. His voice cracked, but his gaze never wavered. Across the room, one of the HOA clerks moved to the bulletin board. He smoothed a sheet against the cork, pinning it neat with 2 tacks. Across the top, bold letters, "Official transcript." The record already written words captured even as they passed. Minutes filed before breath cooled. History on paper, someone whispered. But the silence around us said otherwise. I lifted my mug. The coffee was lukewarm, bitter at the edge, but my hand no longer trembled. The patch remained where it was plain for all to see, no longer hidden. Commander Harris studied me, his eyes unreadable. Slowly, he stepped back. The steel in his stance loosened, the question withdrawn. The youth's eyes shone bright, alive with something like pride or hope. His shoulders squared, his breath deepened. It was as though the weight had shifted slightly from me to him, a bridge laid between generations. No cheer rose. No applause broke out. But the silence itself had turned. What once accused now acknowledged. What once mocked now carried respect unspoken. I set the mug down, the sound sharp against wood. The patch glimmered faint under the amber light. Tomorrow would not look like yesterday, and in that silence tomorrow had already begun. By Sunday afternoon, the church hall filled the way it does for potlucks and hymn practice, long tables, folding chairs, a line of casseroles steaming under foil. The choir warmed up near the piano, vowels bending into a soft river sound. Word had moved faster than any bulletin. What happened at the lounge spread along pews and sidewalks, rode out in the backs of pickups, drifted across porches with the dust. I slipped into the back row and kept my cap low. From here, the hall looked like a map of the town itself, mail carriers, store owners, ranch hands, the boardmen with their tidy folders. A few faces turned when I came in, not with the old smirk, but with something slower, cautious. Maggie from the diner brushed past me with a casserole dish, the glass hot through her mitts. "Green bean," she said, not breaking stride. "The only thing this crowd agrees on." I nodded. "Smells like Sunday." She smiled and kept going. In front, the choir director lifted a hand, and the warm-up closed like a zipper. Voices fell, chairs scraped. The board secretary stepped to the microphone with a sheet of paper and a throat clear that meant business. "This is to announce," she read, "the Homeowners Association's special meeting agenda, to include community recognition policy, exhibit guidelines, and archival procedures." She held the page up so we could all see the letterhead. "This notice is posted at the post office and the library board." Her eyes flicked toward me just once, as required. There on the far wall by the door, someone had taped up a cell phone printout, a picture of the post office bulletin board from this morning. In the center of that photo, my old patch was pinned because to the parade permit. The edges looked brighter in the camera flash than they did in my hand. A hush came, not the heavy kind from the lounge, but a quilt of small silences stitched together. Folks stood with paper plates and didn't reach for the serving spoons yet. Somewhere behind me a baby laughed, then burrowed back into a shoulder. I settled into the back pew and closed my eyes. The wood was cool through my jacket. I let the choir's soft hum wash over me. Breath in, breath out. Let the noise of memory run to the fence line and stop. For a few heartbeats, there was only the room, the faint lemon of floor polish, the cinnamon hanging off one of the casseroles, the creak of a hymn book rack. "Hey," a young voice whispered. I opened my eyes. The youth stood in the aisle, shifting from toe to heel. "You okay, sir? I'm fine." He nodded, then glanced toward the photo on the wall. They pinned it. At the post office. People were taking pictures. He scratched his neck, embarrassed at his own eagerness. "I think it mattered." "Maybe it did," I said. He looked back at me like he wanted permission to be proud. I didn't give him a speech. I just tipped my chin. That seemed to be enough. Up front, the board chair took the mic. "We're here to discuss process," he said, which is what men say when their hearts haven't caught up to news their eyes already saw. "We want to avoid undue celebration without verification." Murmurs. Someone from the choir spoke from her seat. "We were there. We heard him." The chair adjusted his tie. "Still. Procedure." Maggie set her casserole down with a decisive clink. "Procedure's important," she said, "but so is decency." A rancher cleared his throat. "Maybe we misjudged him." The line rippled through the room the way wind moves wheat. It wasn't apology yet. But it was wind enough to shift a field. The youth still beside me whispered, "They're different today." "People change slow," I said. "Like seasons. You notice it most when you look back." He glanced again at the photo of the board. "Is that how it should be remembered? It's a start." The choir director raised her hand, and the sopranos found their note. A hymn rose, not the booming kind, but the one they sing when a casserole line is about to form and no one wants to trample feelings. The sound reached the rafters and settled back on our shoulders. When the last chord faded, the board secretary lifted the notice once more and read it again, line by necessary line, as if the repetition could sew up what the town had torn the night before. "Library exhibit pending. Post office board temporary. Archival review scheduled." The youth leaned closer. "Will they keep it up for a while?" I said. "Long enough for the story to get its legs." He considered that, then smiled a little. "Long enough for kids to ask questions." We stood when the pastor asked us to. He didn't preach. He just spoke like a neighbor whose fence you've leaned on for years. "Sometimes we talk too much," he said, hands folded easy. "Sometimes the wisest thing we can do is make space for quiet." Silence itself was the loudest honor. The words hung there warm as the casserole steam. A few heads bowed. A few hands found pockets. Even the board chair's shoulders loosened. They opened the food line, and the room found its old rhythm paper plates, fork scrape, thank you murmurs. I stayed seated, content to watch. Folks drifted by, offering nods where jokes used to be. The mailman tapped his cap and pointed at the taped photo on the wall. "Saw that first delivery," he said. "Never seen the board look better." "Camera helps," I told him. "Truth helps more," he replied and moved along. Near the dessert table, two of the board men stood over a dish of brownies, no swagger left in their posture. "We'll sort the policy," one said to the other, "but we can start by not being fools." "That'd be policy enough," the other answered. and they both tried to smile. The youth reappeared with a paper plate balanced like a waiter's tray. "Saved you a corner piece," he said. "I'll eat when the line's done." He nodded, then looked toward the front where the notice lay on the lectern. "They're going to do something right. Not just talk, they'll do enough to call it done," I said. "Then tomorrow we'll ask for more." He chewed that over the way he'd just chewed brownie, slow and serious. "I can help at the library," he said. "If they, you know." The room's noise swelled and thinned, an ocean caught inside cinder-block walls. Someone laughed. Someone clapped a shoulder. Somewhere a fork fell and skittered under a chair. Life as we knew it, making room for the new part. From the front row, the librarian rose, a stack of manila folders hugged to her chest. She adjusted her glasses and looked out over the plates and the choir robes and the huddle of board members. Her gaze found the taped photo, then me, then the youth at my side. She cleared her throat. "We want this in the library," she said. The choir, the board, the forks, the fans. Everything paused, like even the dust chose to hover mid-air to hear what would be said next. The town hall smelled of old wood and varnish, its benches worn smooth by years of Sunday assemblies and midweek disputes. Tonight every seat was filled. Lanterns glowed against the paneled walls, the air buzzing not from flies or fans, but from neighbors' breath, expectant, tense, waiting. The bulletin board at the far end held notices and bylaws, and pinned right in the center my patch. Faded cloth, frayed edge colors worn but visible, a reminder no gavel could erase. I sat in the second row, hands folded, my shoulders still. Commander Harris stood at the front, his uniform neat, his posture stiff, as if iron could still hold him. But there was a looseness in his jaw tonight, a shadow at the corner of his mouth. His strength had been tested, and for the first time he looked less like a commander and more like a man. The chair of the board tapped a gavel. "We are gathered under Article 6 of the bylaws," he said, voice echoing more brittle than firm. "Community recognition policy proposed amendment." He adjusted his glasses and looked toward Harris, then toward me, then toward the room full of neighbors. "This is a vote." The choir leader seated in the back whispered to the woman beside him. She nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the patch on the board. Near me, Maggie from the diner crossed her arms, apron still dusted with flour. Her lips pressed thin, but her gaze was clear. A young boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "That's his?" he asked, pointing toward the board. "Yes," the father murmured. "That's his." The room hushed. Harris cleared his throat. His voice tried to sound steady, but a waver slipped through. "Recognition. It should follow procedure. Verification. Otherwise we risk sentiment guiding policy." A rancher in the third row spoke out, "Policies what we wrote to protect each other. Sentiments what we live by." Applause broke, not loud, but firm. It surprised even the board chair, who looked up sharply and tapped his gavel again. "Order, please. We will proceed." I said nothing, only nodded once. My eyes lowered, the weight of years pressing gentle but steady. The patch spoke enough. My silence was my voice. The secretary read aloud, each word measured. "Bylaws Section 4, Community Recognition, shall be determined by vote of attending members. Acknowledgement may include display of service artifacts on public boards and archival preservation in the town library." Every phrase dropped like stones into a well. People listened, people breathed, people remembered. The youth rose from his seat. His words carried clear despite the tremor in his hands. "You asked who he was. He told you. You wrote it down. We all heard it. What else do you need?" A wave of murmurs followed, stronger this time, cresting against Harris's still frame. The commander shifted shoulders, sagging just enough to show the fight was leaving him. Maybe, the librarian said gently from her place near the front. It's time we stop doubting and start honoring. Seconded Maggie said, her arms unfolding, palms open. The board chair looked uneasy, but the motion had moved past him. It lived in the benches, in the voices rising in the air itself. We will vote, he announced finally. Those in favor of formal recognition, raise your hands. For a moment, stillness. Then hands rose one after another, farmers, clerks, choir singers, students. The motion swept like wind through wheat. Even those who had scoffed at me in the diner lifted their arms, shame tempered into resolve. The chair scanned the sea of raised hands. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Those opposed. No hand rose. He swallowed hard. The vote is unanimous. The youth exhaled a sound loud as thunder in the hush. He turned toward me, eyes bright pride unhidden. We will honor Viper 1, he said, voice strong. Applause followed this time, rolling through the benches like hymn chords. Not thunderous, but steady, heartfelt, echoing against rafters that had heard decades of argument and prayer. I remained still, only nodding once more, my silence carrying what my words never could. Justice can arrive without a shout. The gavel came down with a soft knock. Recognition is past, the chair declared, effective immediately. On the board behind him, the patch seemed to catch the lantern light, glowing faint but resolute. And in that glow I felt the weight shift, not lifted, not erased, but shared at last. After the unanimous vote, the town hall finally exhaled. Benches creaked, choir folders shut, and he stood in the aisle while neighbors, some who'd laughed before, touched his sleeve and set a paper cup of coffee in his hand. He didn't say much. He only watched as the librarian lifted the patch from the bulletin board and with a nod promised a place behind glass at the library, proof enough for anyone who needed it. Kindness, he understood, wasn't change returned with interest. It was a lamp in a winter window, steady because someone chose to keep it lit. Quiet kept its promise. By evening, the caption was typed, Service Patch Viper 1, and the minute book lay open beside it. He read the line once, breathed easier, and let the door swing shut behind him. Viper 1 stands softly.